Hello, everybody, and happy Friday. My name is Mary Abbajay, and I would like to welcome you to the Friday 15, which is our weekly live broadcast where we go live for 15 fast, furious, hopefully fruitful minutes. Well, today they might be frightening minutes because today's topic is going to be the truly terrible toxic boss, or as I like to call it, the terrible truth about toxic bosses. So we're going to talk about toxic bosses today. We're going to talk about who they are. We're going to talk about why they exist, and we're going to talk about how you can navigate them. And I have a couple of slides I'm going to share with you. So let me go ahead and get those up here so we can get started. The first thing I want you to know about toxic bosses is that they're not just difficult bosses, right? We have plenty of difficult bosses, and we've talked about them before on the show. The narcissists, the micromanagers, the ghost bosses. These people are annoying, but they're not truly toxic. When we talk about a toxic boss, we're talking about the screamers, the shouters, the narcissists, the gaslighters, the bullies. We're talking about people who are emotionally, psychologically, and sometimes even physically abusive. We're talking about the people that thrive on intimidation. They thrive on humiliating, on bullying, on degrading their staff. They're not just simply difficult, they're truly toxic bosses. And I truly believe toxic human beings. So when we think about these people, the sad state of affairs is that they really are everywhere. Nearly 50% of American workers say that they have experienced a toxic boss, a toxic culture, or a toxic colleague. A recent study showed that 10 to 15% of managers regularly engage in toxic behaviors. People, this is unacceptable. This breaks my heart. In the chat box, let me get my chats up. In the chat box, if you've ever worked for a toxic boss, let us know. Has this ever happened to you? And if so, what did you do about it? All right, so when we think about toxic bosses, I want you to know three things right from the start. The first one is that toxic bosses will make you sick. And I mean this literally, people. Research shows over and over again the very real and the very damaging psychological, emotional, and physical diseases, ailments that are caused by toxic bosses. People that work in toxic cultures or for toxic bosses have a 60, that's 60, increased chance of developing cardiac disease, of developing diabetes, and of actually having a stroke. We know that people that work for toxic bosses have a lowered immune system. As you work for this toxic boss, and it just completely decimates your physiological, your psychological, and your emotional health, which makes you much more susceptible to flus, colds, mental health, depression. All these problems happen when we are depleted from working for a toxic boss. The bottom line is people that work for toxic bosses get more sick more often and report higher levels of emotional and physical exhaustion. It will make you sick. The second thing you need to know about working for a toxic boss is that the longer you work for one of these jokers, the longer it will take for you to recover. It can take nearly 2 years to fully recover from the impact and the effects of working for a toxic boss. The mental health professionals are comparing this to, number one, post-traumatic stress syndrome, number two, Stockholm syndrome, and number three, even battered spouse syndrome. And with any psychological trauma or any psychological and emotional terrible situation, the longer you stay, the longer it will take you to recover. So it will make you sick, and it's going to take a while to get over. And the third thing I want you to know about working for a toxic boss, and this is the most important thing I want you to know, and that is that nobody is coming to save you. Let me save this again. Nobody is coming to save you. HR isn't coming to save you. Your boss's boss isn't coming to save you. And let's be clear, it's not that HR doesn't want to help you. They probably do. It's just that in many situations, HR doesn't have the power to help you. HR is there to protect the company, not you. And all too often when we're talking about toxic bosses, is that these people often sit at the very top of the corporate situation or the business. So they have sort of what we call protected status in that sense. They are the bosses, right? Or maybe they're super high performers or super high achievers. And so the organization, they're going to turn a little bit of a blind eye to this person because they don't want to get rid of their high performer or their rainmaker, right? Or sometimes these toxic bosses are so good at hiding their manipulative behaviors that their bosses may not know the level of their toxicity. But for whatever reason, you need to know if nobody is coming to save you, then you must save yourself. So I'm going to give you a couple of high-level strategies of what you can do when you find yourself working for a toxic boss. And then we're going to explore some actual toxic boss types to give you some more targeted strategies for each of these. All right, so the first thing you want to do if you're working for a toxic boss is this. You are going to want to protect your mental health. This is really critically important because a toxic situation is going to impact you psychologically and emotionally. So you want to make sure that you're doing what you can to create some emotional distance between you and the abusive behaviors. Imagine, if you will, that you have this protective golden shield around you that is preventing their poisonous arrows from getting into your heart and soul. It may require playing some mind games with yourself, and so that you are maybe able to distance yourself. Like maybe you distance yourself out, or maybe you try to look at them with pity or with humor. Whatever you need to do to prevent their poison from getting inside of you, you need to do it. You have to adapt to survivor mentality and protect your mental health. The second thing that everybody's going to need when they're working for a toxic boss is to activate a support network. You are going to need people around you that can keep you emotionally and psychologically healthy and stable during this time. Surround yourself with friends and people who will support and encourage you. Remember, as you work for this toxic boss, you are going to find yourself emotionally and psychologically depleted. So you need to have people around you that can help keep you up, keep you whole. You might try talking to a coach or a therapist or another trained professional that can help you get through this. You are going to need a support network, so activate one immediately. My third strategy in general for dealing with a toxic boss is to minimize direct contact. I mean, literally stay out of the line of fire. And you want to really make sure that you are reducing the amount of time or the number of interactions that you are having with this toxic person. Maybe it looks like moving your office. Maybe it looks like even more teleworking. Maybe it looks like really being very clear about when you have to interact with this person and when you don't. You want to really make sure you limit their ability to infect and poison you. So limit your direct contact. The fourth strategy for dealing with a toxic boss is to start to think about, getting yourself out. Remember, you're going to have to save yourself. There are ways that you can survive this, but you're never really going to thrive under a toxic boss. So look for opportunities within your organization. Look for other jobs or other opportunities that might be a good fit for you. Network around. Don't badmouth your toxic boss because that's not going to work. But go see if there's other places in your organization that might be a good fit, or maybe a detail or a part-time thing. But make sure that you look first within your own company for other opportunities. And the last thing you want to think about with the toxic boss is simply get out. You have to be ready to save yourself. And sometimes the best way to save yourself is to get out. Now, I know that most of us can't just quit a job without having another job lined up. So start lining up another job. Remember, no job is going to be worth your mental and physical health. So sometimes we have to be ready to acknowledge that our best course of action is to get out and save ourselves. So these are 5 basic overarching strategies for toxic bosses, things that you want to be thinking about implementing in order to survive the situation. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about a few very common toxic bosses to give you 1 or 2 more targeted strategies that you can try with a toxic boss. And of course, the first thing I want to say is this before we get into these strategies is that, of course, you can always escalate, but you want to escalate with extreme caution because you need to really know like how strong is your HR department, what's their reputation or their history for dealing with other situations. You could also consult a lawyer, an employment lawyer. So there's lots of options that you can look at, but you want to be very careful before you explore escalation. You want to really make sure you have your ducks in a row and everything lined up. Kristen Shattuck says, what type of style of feedback is helpful when talking to a toxic boss? Well, so I'm not really sure that toxic boss is ever going to be open to feedback. Quite frankly, if your toxic boss is toxic, then your chances of you having a direct conversation with them about their behavior could end up really biting you in the butt. It could escalate their toxicity. So you want to be very, very careful about that. You're going to want to probably talk to other people that know this boss to find out how they can get feedback from them. All right, so let's talk about a couple of specific toxic bosses. One is the narcissist. And I know we've talked about the narcissist before. So a couple of things about narcissism. One, mild or medium narcissism is actually probably pretty manageable. You could actually probably survive with the mild case of narcissism. But when that boss gets super narcissistic, when their narcissism is so high, it becomes really untenable, then you're going to want to figure out how long you can actually deal with that, because narcissists tend to be very successful people. So you could actually further your career by working for them for a while. The thing about narcissists, though, is that you're going to have to be a bit of a sycophant. People who suck up to narcissists survive, and that may not be your cup of tea. So what you want to do with a narcissist is learn what you can while you can stand them, and then you really do need to look to get out. You want to make sure that while you're working for a narcissist, you are also protecting, again, your self-esteem, your mental health, but also your professional image, because you don't want other people to see you as a sycophant. So you want to make sure your colleagues see you as a strong, independent-minded professional. When you have a narcissist, if you want to change their mind, or you want to get them to agree with you, or you want them to agree to an idea of yours, you always want to appeal to their image, because that's what narcissists care about. So you'll say something like, hey, narcissist boss, like, I'm afraid if we go this direction, it will look poorly on you. So you want to make sure you're always appealing to their image. The second typical toxic boss I want to talk about is, oops, I went too far, is the gaslighter. And this is a very disturbing image. So gaslighters tend to be very nefarious toxic bosses, because so much of what they do flies under the radar. And the gaslighter, for those of you who don't know, this is the person that they make you question your own reality. They lie to your face. They say, I never said that. You didn't do that. That's not what happened. And they literally try to distort reality so that you think that you are losing your mind. So they're very duplicitous, and their behavior often flies under the radar. So people don't actually even know what's going on. So if you have a gaslighter, again, escalate with extreme caution. If you go to this gaslighter and accuse them of gaslighting you, it may not end well for you. So protect your mental health. Again, that goes for all this. But with the gaslighter, you're also going to want to make sure you are documenting your interactions, really following up in conversations and writing. You're going to want to have a little email trail or a documentation for the gaslighter in case you do want to escalate, or in case you do want to gently catch them out in their lies. You also want to make sure that you are minimizing any solo interactions that you have with the gaslighter. Try to have interactions when other people are present. It's going to be a lot harder for this gaslighter to gaslight you when there's other people around hearing the same information. So you want to be very careful not to have too many solo interactions if you can help it. Unless the gaslighter is just gaslighting everybody. And when they gaslight everybody, that can make it very hard for them to continue doing it, because you're going to have a lot more documentation. And as I said before, you want to escalate very carefully. Really think about who you're going to escalate to. Think about what you want out of that conversation. Think about what you think can be done. There's a lot of great research on gaslighting. We will put some into the chat box after the session. So that's some ideas for the gaslighter. Now, for your psycho, crazy, tyrant, bully, screamer, shouters, again, this is all about saving yourself. You're going to want to have a support network, as I said. You're going to want to protect your mental health. You are going to want to stay on the line of fire. But what I really need everybody to know is that a poison well is a poison well. You can try as many strategies as you want with the toxic boss, but the toxic boss, when they are toxic, when they are poison, it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter what you try. They are going to poison you no matter what. So we always must be ready to get out. It's always one of your options to think about, to save yourself, to get out. So here's the thing I want to leave you with as we're coming up with the end of our session here, is that the research is clear. Working for a toxic boss is bad for your physical and your mental health. So you want to cultivate whatever coping strategies you can, but chances are that nobody is coming to save you. So you must save yourself. Your health and your well-being are far more important than this job. So that is the terrible truth about the toxic bosses. I want to thank you all for joining me today on the Friday 15. Next week, we're going to be doing a Cubicle Confidential with the amazing Chris DeSantis. And we're actually going to be talking about the topic of that show is the itch to snitch. So we're going to talk about like whether or not you should rat that person out, whether it's your boss or whether it's your colleague. And if you do need to snitch on somebody, what's the best way to do it? So until next week, I hope you have a great work week. Be good, be kind. And if you're working for a toxic boss, get out.